Right here is Scott United Methodist Church. It's located in a neighborhood where thousands of blacks came to live after fleeing the South. They sought a place to live without fear, lynching, hopelessness, a place where they could worship God. One of those families was Henry and Keziah Martin, my great-grandparents. It was in their home that this church began. This is the story of Scott United Methodist Church.
Methodist churches were among the few institutions where blacks and whites could congregate on more or less equal terms for a singular purpose, to worship God. As slavery became more harsh and monetized, racial injustice and racism increased and caused tension within the integrated churches. While on their knees praying in 1786 in Philadelphia at St. George Methodist Episcopal Church that they helped build, former slaves Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, and other black people at the service were ordered off their knees and told to go up to the balcony. Allen, Jones, and the other black parishioners protested by leaving the church. This incident and similar ones led to the formation of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1816 by Allen. The African Methodist Episcopal Church Zion and the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church formed for similar reasons. In Indianapolis, Simpson Methodist Church and other Methodist Episcopal churches were formed. Henry Martin from Palmyra, Tennessee, and Keziah Martin from Cementville, Indiana, joined Simpson after moving to Indianapolis from Cementville in 1908.
My name is Ethel Brewer McCain. I'm the great-granddaughter of two of the founders of this church, Henry and Keziah Martin. Henry and Keziah Martin had a dream that the east side of town certainly needed to address some of the young people that were in the area. And so in 1908, this church was basically started in their home. After several different moves about the community, the church purchased a blacksmith shop and held services there for a while. It actually started with a Sunday school program in the home of my great-grandparents.
Soon, the Sunday school class meeting every week at the Martins grew to 25, too many to meet in their house.
And for this I give him the praise.
The Lexington Conference, which was the conference for all black Methodist Episcopal churches in the Midwest, appointed Reverend William Ellis to pastor Scott Chapel. But in less than a year, he left and a Baptist minister, Reverend Preston Morton, was appointed to lead Scott Chapel.
The Lexington Conference. When we left the Lexington Conference, we left something. We left something when we left the Lexington Conference. Because going to a conference was our big deal. We worked all the year to raise the money and had a big rally. We always had a big deal and run a bus to wherever the conference was going. But now we hardly ever know when the conference is. You just see an announcement in the paper and the preacher and one or two more others go off and you don't know nothing that went on.
In 1910, under Reverend Jones's leadership, a frame church was built where the blacksmith shop stood. Scott Chapel was named after Bishop Levi Scott, the third bishop who presided over the Lexington Conference and who was considered a friend to the colored man. Many have suggested that Scott Chapel was actually named after Isaiah Scott, a prominent African American in the Methodist Episcopal Church. Scott recently passed a resolution affirming that Isaiah Scott was the person who Scott was named after. From 1915 to the 1930s, black families from the South continued to migrate north. This was called the Great Migration because it was the largest ever relocation of African American families out of the rural South to the North and Midwest. Many arrived in Indianapolis and moved their families to the East Side.
In 1919, Reverend J.S. Roberts was appointed to pastor Scott. The church agreed that a new church would be built. A lot was purchased at 2131 Martindale. Members raised funds for 3 years. The groundbreaking took place on August the 12th, 1923.
In Indianapolis, whites tried a variety of tactics to discourage African Americans from moving into their neighborhoods, including passing a city ordinance in 1926 that made it illegal for a person to move into a neighborhood whose current residents were primarily of a different race without the consent of the majority of residents. In 1926, that law was declared unconstitutional. By 1930, the blocks surrounding Scott were 40% African American.
The first worship service was held at the new church on August 1st, 1924. The celebration of the new church lasted a week. Services were conducted by Reverend H.A. Wilkes and Henry Martin. Brother William Jones was over the Sunday school. Groups were formed for women and men. A choir was formed. From 1924 to 1967, it was the best of times and the worst of times.
We had a vibrant, lively Sunday school. Back in those days, the men were a little more active than they are at the present day. We had a man Sunday school teacher, which I always looked up forward to. We had Boy Scouts troops here in the basement. We always came over to the church, had activities for the youth to the best of our facilities and our means.
The Great Depression began in 1929 and was the longest lasting and most devastating of them all. It was also a time when the Klan in Indiana was at its zenith.
I feel like going on.
Corey Frazier became the first female trustee of the church.
They wanted to venture out and have a women trustee, and I was the first woman trustee in this church. And I used to sing in the choir, believe it or not. I used to sing in the choir. And I got to the point that I thought that I was going to lead some song, like Rhoda does, but I wasn't that good,
In 1928, Reverend D.E. Skelton, the district superintendent who promoted the founding of Scott Chapel in the conference, was appointed to pastor Scott. Families in the neighborhood got by. Men worked in various industrial and production companies in the area or at one of the Jewish-owned businesses. The women took in laundry or did day work. Some families were able to send their children to college, and many of those grads became the professionals in the community, the teachers, doctors, and lawyers. Children in the neighborhood went to school 26 and 56. While some attended other high schools, most attended Crispus Attucks, which was built for African Americans. Blacks had their own businesses: Club Savoy, shoe shine parlors, pool rooms, construction companies, restaurants, funeral homes.
From 1940 to 1945, the church was revived and redecorated. Repairs were made, but foreclosure was also threatened by the Railroadman Building and Loan Company. Members pitched in to make sure that wouldn't happen. A scout team was organized, so was a basketball team. The church supported community organizations such as the Senate YMCA.
One of the things we did, we formed a group, and we used to go to the old Senate YMCA to learn how to swim. And we enjoyed that. Some of us learned how to swim, some of us didn't. And I remember the old jingle that they put a sinker on a yellow ribbon and tied it around your neck. And they used to sing, around his neck, he wears a yellow ribbon. He wears it when he works and he wears it when he plays. The only reason he wears a yellow ribbon is a sinker and he can't swim.
Another parsonage was purchased at 2338 Carrollton. In June 1964, Reverend Dorsey returned and remained until his retirement in 1971. The United Methodist Men and Women's Group were formed. But a new setback would occur. Arson destroyed a part of the church in February of 1965. No one was ever charged with setting the blaze. The church met at the parsonage. The membership voted to remain and rebuild.
can't turn around. We come this far by faith.
The Vietnam War, riots. It was during this era that the Evangelical United Brethren and Methodist churches united to form the United Methodist Church.
The real issue we are facing at the Uniting Conference has to do with racism and the fact of whether or not we're going to deal with it adequately. Let me say that there are a number of us who hope that by the persuasion and coercion and pressure that we can bring to bear, that we can sensitize the minds and eyes and hearts of people by which they can then, in fact, take a decisive action in regards to making this a racially inclusive church.
In June 1979, Reverend Joy L. Thornton from Shady Grove, Arkansas, was sent to Pastor Scott. It would be under his leadership that the building plan would be set into motion.
We have great plans for extending our church into a new building, and we're hoping that this will come to pass very soon.
Reverend Thornton appointed Ethel Brewer McCain, one of the great-granddaughters of Henry Martin, to lead the building committee. In March 1994, construction of the new church began under the pastorate of Reverend Melvin Hitchens. Volunteers, including many from churches with predominantly Caucasian members, including St. Luke United Methodist Church, worked tirelessly to build Scott. Henrietta Brewer, the granddaughter of Henry Martin, was among those turning the first spades of dirt for the new church. On January 22, 1995, the congregation, led by Bishop Woody White, marched into the new building. Reverend Gwendolyn Roberts, Reverend Ivan Jenkins, and Reverend Raymond Wilkins filled the gap from 1996 until the arrival of Reverend James Anike in 2008. Reverend Anike came bringing relevant preaching, community development, and cultural awareness. Soft-spoken and hard-working, he rolled up his sleeves to do anything necessary to keep the church afloat.
Today, new life at Scott is evident. Reverend Anike works on bridging the gap between generations with the G2G conference annually. He has a radio show that explores issues relevant to African Americans, and young families are building homes in the area. Efforts are being made to rid the area of brown fields, though industry remains prevalent through the neighborhood. Yet, Scott continues to survive and thrive through it all.
There is reason for hope. We have, as I said, new members, some good new ministries. We have a good focus on young people and children. And as long as we continue to grow that, the future for Scott will be bright. Not just that, but this area that we're in is also in transition. It is growing in terms of the diversity of people in the community, and I believe that Scott is in a very good position to minister to the different needs and different interests that are in the community. And so as long as we use our gifts individually to feed and serve the collective aim of making disciples of Jesus Christ in this community, we can't help but grow. And I believe that's the future of Scott. But it will take a lot of work, it will take a lot of energy, it will take a lot of commitment, it'll take a lot of faithfulness, it'll take a lot of sacrifice, it'll take a lot of risk-taking. A lot of things will have to happen for it to take place, but I see in our congregation a lot of people who are determined to be a part of its growth and its future.
I've had many tears and sorrow. I've had questions for tomorrow. There've been times I didn't know right from wrong. But in every situation, God gave me blessed consolation that my trials come to only make me strong. I've been a lot of places, and I've seen millions of faces, but there were times that I felt so all alone. But in my lonely hour, yet those precious lonely hours, Jesus let me know that I was his own. That's the reason I say that through it all, through it all, oh, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Let me tell you that through it all, oh, through it all, oh, I've learned to depend upon his word. So I thank God for the mountains, and I thank him for the valleys, and I thank him for the storms he's brought me through. Oh, if I'd never had a problem, I'd never know that God could solve them. I'd never know what faith in his word could do. That's the reason I say that through it all, through it all, oh, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. But let me tell you through it all, through it all, oh, I've learned to depend upon his word. Oh, let me tell you right now that through it all, sometime through the fire, through it all, my Lord, oh, I've learned to trust in Jesus. Oh, I've learned, and I can see trust in God, that through it all, let me tell you that through it all, oh, Lord, I've learned to depend upon his word. Oh, through my sickness and pain, oh, I've learned to depend upon his word. Oh, through sorrow and shame, I've learned to depend upon his word.